President Trump says a peace deal might be near, threatens to bomb the hell out of Iran, and boasts about the markets. Another day of war whiplash. And anti-Semitic assaults reach a record high. We'll ask why. And is South Carolina Republican and Trump ally Lindsey Graham vulnerable? Well, we'll talk to the long shot Democrat trying to take him on. Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in for Major Garrett tonight. Welcome to the Takeout and thanks for joining us. President Trump has once again signaled that the war with Iran may be ending, but messages from both him and his cabinet also signal that they're fighting a war with clarity. And clarity, at least at this point, doesn't seem to be winning. And today, the president told PBS that the war has a, quote, very good chance of ending. He then told the New York Post that it's too soon to prepare for a peace deal signing because uranium enrichment remains a sticking point. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this about Operation Epic Fury in his press conference yesterday.
The operation is over. Epic Fury, as the president notified Congress, we're done with that stage of it.
Then today on Truth Social, Trump posted, assuming Iran agrees to give what has been agreed to, which is perhaps a big assumption, the already legendary Epic Fury will be at an end. As for Operation Project Freedom, this is where the U.S. would escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump announced that was being paused just hours after Rubio said it was a new phase of the war. So if you are having trouble keeping up with the different directions that this war is going, don't worry, you're not alone. And lucky for you, we have a few experts to help walk us through it. First is CBS Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cortez. Nancy, great to see you. Thanks for being here. So I have to admit, I have a little bit of whiplash myself. Can you kind of walk us through where the White House is at this point?
Sure. I mean, most of the details that we've gotten today have come from the president himself and not White House officials. But what the president has been saying is that he believes that progress has been made in talks over the past 24 hours or so, and that he thinks there could be a deal in the next 24 to 48 hours on a memorandum of understanding that would basically set out the terms for negotiation going forward. So this wouldn't be some big overarching deal over Iran's nuclear program. It would simply say we are agreeing to talk about Iran's nuclear program, about U.S. sanctions on Iran, about frozen Iranian assets, and all the rest. Now, President Trump has said many times before that he thought that he was within reach of a deal, and those promises did not pan out. So we're watching the latest developments with a healthy dose of skepticism, especially because we haven't heard similar optimism coming from the Iranians yet. They say they have a new U.S. proposal and they are looking it over, but that's about all they've said so far.
And Nancy, what about the original plan to help guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz? How is the president defending that pause?
So he said last night in a Truth Social post that he was imposing the pause at the request of Pakistani mediators and other countries to give these negotiations time to play out over the next couple of days. It wasn't clear why the project had to be paused so soon after it had started, and after an entire day of not just President Trump, but also his secretaries of state and defense basically extolling the virtues of this new project, saying that it was going to reopen the strait, get ships moving again. In the end, only 2 commercial vessels were escorted through before the project was halted. So President Trump says this is all about diplomacy. At the same time, he is warning that if there isn't an agreement in the next couple of days, that the war could resume and that the U.S. could be pounding the Iranians harder than ever. So I think that, there's a lot of confusion right now over whether we are truly witnessing a diplomatic breakthrough or whether the goals have simply shrunk, or whether this is a lot of talk and actually we could see more kinetic action in the days ahead.
Yeah, big open question. But Nancy, thank you very much for guiding us all through it. I feel like I have a little more clarity now. So for more on this, we're going to turn to CBS News national security analyst Aaron McLean. He's also the host of the School of War podcast. Aaron, thanks so much, as always, for being here. I want to pick up on the Strait of Hormuz and this idea that they were supposed to be escorting ships through the strait. That is now on hold. What should we be reading into this?
Well, Caitlin, in your introduction, you used, I think, the phrase whiplash-inducing. I certainly concur with that as an assessment. I was very surprised to see administration officials out for 2 days defending and explaining this operation, only to see it halted yesterday evening. The purpose of the operation, of course, was to remove or at least reduce the leverage that Iran has achieved by closing off the Strait of Hormuz, to keep our blockade on their points, but to get friendly shipping moving through the strait. Apparently, it has been paused to create the conditions for talks. Not for a deal. The president, people keep saying, it's because we're going to get a deal. No, at most what's on the table from the Iranians is an agreement to talk about a deal. And if you look at it from the Iranian perspective, going back to April 7th when this ceasefire began, the ceasefire was supposed to be paired with an opening of the Strait of Hormuz by the Iranians. They didn't open it, and they suffered no consequences. Then there was a 2-week deadline. The president blew through that 2-week deadline and set it again indefinitely. Then he started an effort to free up shipping in the strait. He paused it 2 days later to have these discussions. If I'm an Iranian negotiator, if I'm Vahidi, the head of the IRGC, who's very influential right now in the Iranian government, I'm not seeing the projection of a great deal of resolve from this administration.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, to the extent that you can get in the minds of the Iranians when they're looking at these kind of competing or contrasting messages coming from the administration. It seems like they can capitalize on that potentially. And is there any chance that they go ahead and help open the strait? I mean, what's the incentive for them in that situation?
It is theoretically possible that this process that apparently we've paused Project Freedom to start could lead to a quote-unquote good deal by the standards of this administration. And I take that deal would involve something like the removal of the highly enriched uranium from Iran and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Why the Iranians would make those concessions in the face of what we're witnessing is a bit mysterious to me. They are famously difficult negotiators. They drive a hard bargain. They drive a hard bargain even when they perceive that they're weak. The United States right now, this administration feels like it's in a very strong position because of the blockade of Iranian ports, which the thought is over time that will grievously damage the Iranian economy, and that's probably true. But the Iranians feel like they're in a strong position because of their blockade of the strait and the economic pressure that puts on the world. Also because President Trump promised the American people a short war. As the strong Iranian response to the opening of the strait in the last couple of days showed, or the attempt to open it, a reopening of the strait will involve more combat.
I want to talk about China in all of this because the Iranian foreign minister said that they trust China. What does that mean right now? Are they playing a role in helping with the strait?
Well, look, I mean, the Chinese and the Iranians are obviously talking. There was a visit there. The Chinese have an interest in opening the strait on some level. I don't think their vision of what the strait being open would mean is exactly the same as what the American vision is. The American vision is a return to February 27th, when it was free to commercial traffic. I can imagine the Chinese signing off on some level of Iranian control, but they certainly want it more open than it is. The problem, I would suggest, is among the unexpected negative consequences of this war, it could be an increased and more substantial Chinese role in the Middle East, which I can't imagine was a war aim of the United States going in. So I would be very leery if I were trying to bring about a deal through leveraging Chinese pressure on the Iranians. That's a dangerous road to go down.
Yeah, that's an important point to make. I also want to talk about, you have Rubio saying that Epic Fury is finished, but also saying that kind of anything done would be in a defensive posture. Does that align? Does that mean, can you say both of those things?
I can imagine a world in which there are military operations purely in the Strait of Hormuz and the United States sort of attempts to resist escalation in other spaces. That's sort of what we saw on Monday and Tuesday when we were defending the very limited amount of shipping that was going through the strait at that point. The Iranians were escalating by striking the UAE, and we were not responding. But on some level, these are all language games that are being played right now. We are in a war. There are periods of relative ceasefire and increased violence, and we kind of go back and forth from day to day. And there are both legal, because of the War Powers Resolution, but also political reasons why this administration just doesn't want to be forthright about this. The president promised a 4 to 6 week war. We're now 2 months in.
Yeah, and he's seeing that political pressure kind of all around the country. Thank you very much. We'll have to invite you back because who knows what tomorrow will bring. Thank you very much, Aaron McClain. Appreciate your time. And switching gears a little bit, it was not a triumphant primary night for Indiana Republican lawmakers who broke with President Trump on redistricting. As of now, Greg Good, who you see on your screen here, was the only state senator to defeat a Trump-backed challenger in Indiana. 5 lawmakers are expected to lose, and one race is too close to call. So CBS News political director Fin Gomez joins me now. Fin, great to see you. Let's talk about what happened last night. This all started over a battle over redistricting, and this seemed to be the Trump team trying to flex their muscles here, and politically it seems like they were effective.
Very effective. It was a big night for Donald Trump and his allies. But it comes down to this, though, Caitlin. If you crossed Donald Trump on redistricting in Indiana, last night was payback night. If you recall, last December, 21 Republican state senators broke ranks and tanked a Trump-backed plan to redraw Indiana's congressional map, a plan that would have wiped out the state's 2 Democratic House seats. The president, as you know, was furious. He promised retribution. And last night, he delivered. At least 5 of those 7 Republican incumbents targeted by Trump got beat by his handpicked challengers. One race is still really close, extremely close, just a handful of votes, in which could go to a recount. But the price tag on all of this, CHP, roughly $13.5 million, according to Ad Impact. That's just an unheard of amount of money for state legislative races. Most of it was spent branding these incumbents as rhinos, as disloyal to MAGA. But look, the takeaway here, Trump's national numbers are sagging nationally because of gas prices, the economy, the Iran war. Voters broadly are cooling on him. But inside the Republican Party, inside these Republican primaries, his endorsement still holds serious sway. Overall, a big win for the president in the Hoosier State last night, Caitlin.
Yeah, Fin, I think this is such a fascinating dynamic, and you lay it out so well there that what happens in primaries may not necessarily translate in the general election. And of course, we're waiting to see if he endorses in that Texas Senate primary. That runoff is coming up soon. We've already seen this in the Louisiana primary. Yeah. So very, very key to watch there to see how this translates. I want to switch gears a little bit because there was also a big election in Michigan in their state Senate, District 35. I know that's kind of in the weeds here, but we know that Democrats performed and kept their majority there. Tell us a little bit about that race and what it could mean.
Sure, and you're dead on, Caitlin. I mean, but this win last night for Democrats, it was a real shot in the arm for Democrats in Michigan. Chedrick Green, he's a fire captain, retired Marine. He pulled in about 60% of the vote and beat the Republican in the race and locked down the Democratic majority in the Michigan State Senate. But this real story here is that it's in Michigan. This is the kind of blue-collar district Trump has been peeling away cycle after cycle from Democrats. Kamala Harris, if you recall, won it by less than a point in 2024. Green, however, won by nearly 20. And his pitch was simple. It focused on affordability. We saw that a lot with Democrats who overperformed in 2025 in some of these special election races as well this year. Republicans say Democrats outspent them and flew in political heavy hitters like Pete Buttigieg. That's fair. But this, as you said, is the latest in a string of Democratic overperformances, and it happened in one of the most crucial of battleground states ahead of the midterms in November. Caitlin.
Yeah, we're going to be watching that state very closely in November, reading all the tea leaves from special elections and primaries. Fin Gomez, thank you very much, as always, my friend.
Thanks, Caitlin.
And the Anti-Defamation League released their annual audit on anti-Semitism in the United States, and it found that in 2025, physical assaults reached a record high. Overall, incidents of anti-Semitism that include harassment, vandalism, and physical assaults declined from 2024, but remain much higher than pre-October 7th numbers. Anti-Defamation League Senior Vice President of Counterterrorism and Intelligence, Oren Siegel, joins me now. Oren, great to see you. I really appreciate your time. These results are stunning, and I want to walk through some of them. We see in the research that physical assaults reached a record high, but overall incidents of anti-Semitism were down for 2025. I'm wondering if you can walk us through those numbers a little bit.
Sure. So every year since 1979 at ADL, we have been documenting actual incidents on the ground of harassment, vandalism, and assault. These represent the lived experiences of the Jewish community. And what we've seen in the last couple of years have been record high after record high. So this past year, for all of 2025, we documented over 6,000. Now, while that is a 33% decrease from the previous year, and decreases are good news, better than increases, it still represents the third highest number we have ever tallied. And so the baseline has shifted significantly, and we are still at very much surge level volume of anti-Semitic incidents. And I think what perhaps is the biggest top line takeaway is that while harassment and vandalism decreased, physical assaults against the Jewish community actually increased 4%.
And Oren, I know so many of us here remember that young couple that was shot here in Washington, D.C., outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum. When you're looking at these incidents of violence, I mean, that's one of many that involved a deadly weapon.
Yeah, I mean, there were over 300 people that were actually impacted by assaults in our data. And not only the shooting in front of the museum in DC, also a firebombing that killed somebody in Boulder, an elderly person. The Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania had his residence set on fire while his family was in there. And there are the day-to-day incidents that may not make national news of children being attacked in their schools, on college campuses, or people walking down the streets in Brooklyn, right? So I think what we need to understand is why, at a time where this decrease is happening, are we still seeing elevated numbers of assaults? And to me, that speaks to a broader normalization of anti-Semitism on our social media, through the impact of influencers in our public discussion. There's a certain hardcore element that we have just not fully solved, but it shows that there's more work to be done, and we're going to double down on the various approaches that we take to pushing back against this hatred.
And to that end, can you explain some of the things that ADL is doing to combat this?
Sure. I mean, prevention is very important, but protection at a time of increased anti-Semitism and especially physical assaults is key. So, in our Center on Extremism, we track the way anti-Semites and others seek to actually target the community. We work very closely with affected communities, with federal, state, and local law enforcement. When we see something, we say something, as my subway in New York says every day. And we happen to see a lot because of our expertise in tracking threats. But I also think that, grant-funded initiatives in terms of providing government funding is what I meant for the safety and security of synagogues is critical here. As assaults go up, there are a lot of non-governmental and religious institutions that are applying for grants so that they get better security. And a lot of those grants have been left unfulfilled. I mean, even in 2026 in Michigan, we saw somebody plow their car into a synagogue when there were 50 children at the day school. So we know that this story is not just 2025, and we have to continue to advocate for the safety and security of our community.
Well, Oren Siegel, thank you very much for talking about those potential things that can be done, and we'll keep an eye on these numbers. Thank you for sharing this with us. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
And still to come on the Takeout, is South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham beatable in his bid for re-election? Dr. Annie Andrews is running as a Democrat, and she thinks so, and she'll join me next live. Also, candidates for California governor clashed on the debate stage. Our political panel weighs in on the state of the race. Plus, chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Susan Del Bene, joins the show. Her response to criticisms over some of the candidates that they're backing. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. And we're just under a month away from primary elections in South Carolina. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is facing some primary challengers, but it's the possible general election matchup that's getting some attention. A poll conducted by Impact Research projects Graham winning in November. But in a generic re-election question, 57% of respondents say that they're looking to vote for someone else. Dr. Annie Andrews, Democratic candidate for South Carolina Senate, joins me now. Dr. Andrews, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I don't need to tell you that South Carolina is a very conservative state. Lindsey Graham has shown again and again that he can beat back lots of primary challengers and also likely to win re-election here. So I guess my question is, why run in that kind of atmosphere against those kinds of odds?
So I don't mind being an underdog. I am a fighter, and it is clear to me that people in South Carolina are ready for something different. Lindsey Graham is a career, corrupt, cowardly politician. He's been our senator for 23 years now, and people understand that he really has abandoned South Carolinians, and he's up in Washington, D.C., really just doing the bidding of Donald Trump. And on the other hand, I'm a pediatrician and a mom who just wants to get up to D.C. and solve problems for South Carolinians.
But for Democrats, I mean, the chances are such a long shot. I mean, you saw Jamie Harrison try this, former DNC chair, with gobs of money and wasn't able to come close. Why kind of take this step, knowing those odds?
Yeah, so our poll shows in a head-to-head matchup, I'm just down by 2 points right now. So we are very much within striking distance because of the political environment we find ourselves in. And South Carolina is not really a deep ruby red state. On a good day, we're about 57% Republican, 43% Democrat, and we can win this thing. Jamie Harrison only lost by 10 points, and that was with Donald Trump on the ballot. And everything Lindsey Graham has done since 2020 has made him less and less popular. He started this war with Iran that is costing American taxpayers $1 billion a day when we shouldn't be investing that money in our healthcare system, our public education system, in fixing our roads and bridges. The job of a U.S. senator is to represent the state that sent you to Washington, D.C., and Lindsey Graham has totally lost his focus on that.
And as I mentioned, you're a doctor. There have been measles outbreaks in South Carolina. Can you walk us through, first of all, what that dynamic has been like there? And in your conversations with voters or people around the state, is there a level of concern about changes in vaccine recommendations and what the state might be doing?
Absolutely. So the upstate of South Carolina has been really central to a measles outbreak that resulted in nearly 1,000 cases of documented measles, which means there were probably 2,000 to 3,000 actual cases of the measles. And the folks that were really concerned about that was new parents of children who are too young to get that MMR vaccine, which is safe and effective at preventing the measles virus. And this is a direct result of the conspiracy theories that our current Secretary of HHS, RFK Jr., has been peddling in for decades. He is a grifter, and he has no business having anything to do with the process of public health policy making. And I blame Lindsey Graham for this because he abdicated his duty as a U.S. Senator when he voted to confirm RFK Jr. And as a result, children have unnecessarily suffered, been sick, and even one young boy in the upstate was hospitalized for weeks and lost the ability to walk and talk and feed himself. So we need to get back to the process of serious, scientific, evidence-based policy making in Washington, D.C., and that's why I'm so excited to be running in this election cycle. I would be our nation's first ever pediatrician senator, the first female doctor in the U.S. Senate, and I would say it's about time.
I want to ask a little bit of the dynamics of the Democratic Party. I mean, you were running as an outsider. You haven't been in elected office before. What do you think your party needs to do differently? What have you seen that really needs an overhaul?
We need to fight fire with fire. We need to realize that the 2008 playbook will not translate to 2026. We need to take our gloves off, and we need to learn how to be more effective messengers. Democrats get it right when it comes to policy making, but what we lack is the ability to go back and communicate our wins, communicate our successes. We see Donald Trump putting his name on Biden infrastructure projects. We see him now putting his name on our money and on our passports. Democrats need to be loud and proud when we do have the opportunity to lead and we do deliver successes for the American people. And we need to meet people where they are. We need to talk like regular people to regular people. And we've just for so long been caught up in this DC machine, and we've lost our focus on the people who sent us to represent them. And that's why I think it's important for a generational shift in leadership, which I would represent, and for outsiders like I am, who just want to get up to Washington, D.C. and use the power of our political process to solve the problems of the people in our districts.
All right, well, we will be keeping an eye on this race heading into the midterms. Dr. Annie Andrews, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you. And up next, Barack Obama says the state of the current leadership of the Democratic Party has a messaging problem. What he tells Stephen Colbert the party can learn from New York City's mayor. We'll discuss that with our political panel next. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we're watching this evening. Media tycoon and founder of CNN, Ted Turner, has died at age 87, 8 years after he revealed his dementia diagnosis. In a statement, CNN's CEO called Turner a committed leader, saying he, quote, always will be the presiding spirit of CNN. Turner's media empire also included cable news channels TBS and TNT. President Trump today called him one of the greats of broadcast history. And Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on Capitol Hill today testifying before the House Oversight Committee about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The closed-door hearing focused on revelations in the Epstein files that the pair were in business together as recently as 2014. The files also found that Lutnick and his family visited Epstein's private island in 2012. Lutnick has denied any wrongdoing and says he never saw Epstein with young women. And 5 California Democrats and 2 Republicans met on the debate stage yet again in the primary for governor last night. Primary day is just less than a month away, and some voters have already started receiving ballots. At one point in the debate, candidates were asked to describe Governor Gavin Newsom in just one word.
Performative.
Bold.
Progressive.
Failed. Steve. Failure. You can't take my word.
All right.
Game changing.
Incomplete.
Let's turn now to our political panel, Republican strategist Aaron McGuire and Democratic strategist Kendra Barkoff-Lamy. Great to see you both. Thank you so much. Okay, so this California race has everything, especially since it's a jungle primary, so the top 2 will advance. Aaron, I want to start with you. Is there any chance that you'll see a Republican advance here?
I mean, there is definitely a likelihood. Steve Hilton has remained very much towards the top of the polling you've seen in California, and he has also done very well in these debates, differentiating himself. When asked about his closeness with President Trump, everybody knows Steve Hilton was a host on Fox News for a while and is definitely MAGA more aligned than anybody else on that stage. He said it's a good thing for people to have a relationship with the president because it means that we can advocate more for what California needs. And I'm not going to apologize that I have the support as an immigrant into this country of the president of the United States. I think that's a great message. So I do certainly think he's a very strong candidate. And with the chaos amongst the Democrats, there's an opportunity for him to be able to be one of the 2 in the jungle primary runoff.
Yeah, Kendra, I want to talk to you a little bit about this because, I mean, the whole country knows who Gavin Newsom is. This is such a critical state for so many reasons. I mean, the 5th largest economy in the world. Why is it that the Democrats are so splintered here? And why can't they kind of rally around one person?
Is it too late for Harris to get in the race? I'm asking for a friend from I'm a Californian myself. Yes. I know it is, unfortunately. You know, it is really interesting. I mean, we saw the fallout of what happened with Swalwell. He obviously should have gotten out of the race for obvious reasons. No one should be running for governor of any state if you're doing that kind of inappropriate work. I think, look, you're seeing a bunch of different people with all different views. It is going to be tough, but I think at least we don't have an oath keeper running in the race. I think that answer last night was super interesting and not great for the Republican side. But it is tough, I will say. They're not as great of options as one would hope for.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in this primary, but the debates have been just fascinating to watch, both sides on the debate stage, let alone everything that we saw from it. I want to play a little bit of an interview that President Obama was on CBS's Late Show with Stephen Colbert last night. Here's what he had to say about New York City's mayor.
What I'm more interested in for Democrats is, do you know how to just talk to regular people like we're not in a college seminar, right? Can you talk plain English to folks about?
I think that's one of the powers that Mamdani has.
That's correct.
So, Kendra, this is interesting because this is what a lot of Democrats have been saying since the last election. What do you make of that coming from the former president?
He was the best communicator that the Democrats have had in a long time running for president, obviously. I love Joe Biden. He's my former boss. He also could communicate and effectively talk to people in a way that had empathy. But look, Democrats need to work on that. We do not have those types of candidates all the time that are able to communicate in a plain English way. And I think that's why you're looking for sometimes outside people to start running for higher office, not just the politicians. I think we'll talk about it potentially. Is Colbert running for president or not? Because I do think he has a way to connect with people in a way that people can understand. I think that's why Donald Trump ultimately won the election, is because he, during the campaign, talked about things in a way that people kind of resonated with them. So I think you are hopefully going to see more and more Democrats understanding that this is what is necessary to win.
Yeah, Aaron, I'm curious your thoughts too.
It's about authenticity.
Yeah.
It's about coming across as not somebody who's rehearsed, and you're not talking about voters and constituents and sounding too robotic. You need to find a way for people to feel like, man, that's the person who's going to help me fix the problems here, right? You want to make your voter the champion, and you want to be the person that they feel like they see at the gas station and in the grocery store, but can go advocate for them. And when you start talking about constituents and voters and turnout and things like that, you lose the conversation. It's why sports are so great for politicians to kind of lean in on. It gives you personality. It gives you something to tie into the community about. And so it really is. Maybe you are the most authentic nerd in the world. You can even lean into that and be a good communicator to voters.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether they can kind of pull that off. The former president also criticized the Department of Justice, saying the DOJ has targeted political adversaries of President Trump. Our Camilo Montoya Galvez had an exclusive interview with the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche. I want to play a little bit of that.
There's something extraordinarily rich about a Democrat suggesting that this administration is charging our political adversaries. First of all, we're not. Second of all, how about we think about what happened the past 4 years? It wasn't just President Trump that got indicted repeatedly in multiple district courts, in multiple jurisdictions, but it was also his entire administration, what was called into the grand jury. Members of his Secret Service detail had to testify in the grand jury. So I welcome criticism. Let's go. But let's, if you're sitting in a glass house, you ought not throw stones.
All right, so we just have about 20 seconds left, but is that fair?
I think that's completely fair. It was the Department of Justice that was weaponized against President Trump, against his campaign. You can go back to Carter Page and the FISA warrants to be weaponized against the president and his campaign and his allies, taps on Susie Wiles' phone. We've seen a lot of weaponization against government. So I do think Todd Blanche does make fair points there.
I would also argue that going after somebody for putting seashells on the seashore is not really a way to use the government in an effective way. And you're seeing DOJ lawyers drop like flies. Nobody wants to participate in this politicization of a department. They are all kind of leaving as a result of it.
All right, well, thank you both very much for being here. We really appreciate your time. To be continued. Too much news to get through. We'll invite you back very soon. Coming up, there's already some infighting between House Democrats heading into the midterms. Next, I'm joined by the chair of the DCCC, the Democratic Campaign Committee. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back. The House Democrats' campaign arm is wading into more highly contested primary races across the country. In a rare rebuke, several House progressives, including Pramila Jayapal and Jamie Raskin, are condemning the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, calling them to let voters decide. Well, Washington State Democratic Congresswoman and DCCC Chair Susan DelBene joins me now. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time. Why is the DCCC getting involved in primaries? You've heard the criticism that they should stay out and let voters decide. Why get involved?
Well, first, let me say we are on offense across the country to take back the majority. We have great candidates running all over the country, and we need to net 3 more seats to take back the majority. We have candidates from presidential battleground states like Arizona and Pennsylvania, and districts that Republicans have put in play thanks to misguided gerrymandering like we saw in Texas. And it is a very diverse set of candidates that we have. We have always been clear that we only weigh in on primaries when we feel that one candidate stands out as the strongest possible nominee to ensure that we win in the general election. This election is too important to do anything else. And so when we do engage in a primary, we work hard on the ground to understand what folks are saying. And we have incredible candidates running across the country. With very diverse backgrounds, a veteran, a firefighter, a doctor, journalist, sheriff, even a Grammy Award-winning musician, people who are uniquely positioned to win in their districts and are connected to their communities.
The progressives who have voiced concern about this strategy have specifically pointed to California's 22nd congressional district. Tell us a little bit about that race and why the DCCC had to get involved.
Well, we have a great candidate there, Dr. Jasmine Baines, who has been a doctor in her community and a representative in her community, doing an incredible job. This is a district that has been devastated by cuts to healthcare, a large Medicaid population. So she's an incredible candidate and definitely can speak to the issues needed on healthcare. But if you look across our candidates, as I said, we have a diverse set of candidates, and we have candidates on our red to blue list. Those are the candidates we think who can win in districts across the country. We have folks who've been endorsed by their local communities and folks who've been endorsed from Bernie to the Blue Dogs, so a pretty broad range.
And as you mentioned, Democrats just have to flip 3 seats in order to take the majority. As it stands right now, how many seats do you think are realistically likely to flip, in your view?
Well, we have an offensive map of 44 seats, and we put those districts on our map because we believe we have opportunities to win in all 44. So we are fighting. We still we are looking at candidates who are doing a great job across the country, and I think people feel really a patriotic calling to run right now, given what's been happening to our country. People have soured on the Republican agenda, the promise that they would lower costs. Costs are skyrocketing across the country, and working families are struggling. So we have opportunities from Pennsylvania and Michigan to Arizona and Iowa, Texas, all because folks are going to stand up for them who aren't going to be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump.
And just quickly here, if Democrats are able to win back the House, is the caucus united around Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker?
Yes, we are working hard to make sure that we have the gavels, that Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker, that we have in the gavels and committees, so we can actually do the work of the people for the people. That's why we're running hard to make sure we have a Congress that actually governs with working families across the country as our first priority.
Congresswoman Susan DelBene, thank you very much for your time. We will stay tuned to those races. Appreciate it. And coming up, our CBS Radio flashback brings us back to World War II and how Edward R. Murrow was able to give a first-hand account of the fighting in Europe. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back to The Takeout and our latest CBS News Radio tribute. Edward R. Murrow brought listeners to the front lines of World War II, and tonight we have his famed 1943 broadcast aboard an Allied bombing run over Berlin. 5 radio correspondents went on the mission, but Murrow was one of only 2 who survived. Here's some of his report.
CBS World News now brings you a special broadcast from London. Columbia's correspondent Edward R. Murrow was on one of the RAF bombing planes that smashed at Berlin last night in one of the heaviest attacks of the war. 41 bombers were lost in the raid, and 3 out of the 5 correspondents who flew with the raiders failed to return. For Mr. Morrow's story of the attack, we take you now to London.
This is London. Yesterday afternoon, the waiting was over. The weather was right. The target was to be the big city. The crew captains walked into the briefing room, looked at the maps and charts, and sat down with their big celluloid pads on their knees. The atmosphere was that of a school and a church. The weatherman gave us the weather. The pilots were reminded that Berlin is Germany's greatest center of war production. The intelligence officer told us how many heavy and light ack-ack guns, how many searchlights we might expect to encounter. By this time, we were about 30 miles from our target area in Berlin. That 30 miles was the longest flight I have ever made. Dead on time, Buzz, the bomb aimer, reported target indicators going down. At the same moment, the sky ahead was lit up by bright yellow flares. Off to starboard, another kite went down in flames. The flares were sprouting all over the sky, reds and greens and yellows, and we were flying straight for the center of the fireworks. D-Dog seemed to be standing still, the 4 propellers thrashing the air, but we didn't seem to be closing in. The cloud had cleared, and off to the starboard, a lank was caught by at least 14 searchlight beams. We could see him twist and turn and finally break out, but still the whole thing had a quality of unreality about it. No one seemed to be shooting at us, but it was getting lighter all the time. Suddenly, a tremendous big blob of yellow light appeared dead ahead, another to the right and another to the left. We were flying straight for them. Jock pointed out to me the dummy fires and flares to right and left, but we kept going in. Dead ahead, there was a whole chain of red flares, looking like stoplights. Another lank was coned on our starboard beam. The light seemed to be supporting it. Again, we could see those little bubbles of colored lead driving at it from 2 sides. The German fighters were at him. And then, with no warning at all, D-Dog was filled with an unhealthy white light. I was standing just behind Jock and could see all the seams on the wings. His quiet Scots voice beat into my ears. Steady, lads, we've been coned. His slender body lifted, half out of the seat, as he jammed the control column forward and to the left. We were going down. Jock was wearing woolen gloves with the fingers cut off. I could see his fingernails turn white as he gripped the wheel. And then I was on my knees, flat on the deck, where he had whipped the dog back into a climbing turn. The knees should have been strong enough to support me, but they weren't. And the stomach seemed in some danger of letting me down, too. I picked myself up and looked out again. It seemed that one big searchlight, instead of being 20,000 feet below, was mounted right on our wingtip. D-Dog was corkscrewing. As we rolled down on the other side, I began to see what was happening to Berlin. The clouds were gone, and the sticks of incendiaries from the preceding waves made the place look like a badly laid out city with the streetlights on. The small incendiaries were going down like a fistful of white rice thrown on a piece of black velvet. As Jock hauled the dog up again, I was thrown to the other side of the cockpit, and there below were more incendiaries, glowing white and then turning red. The cookies, the 4,000-pound high explosives, were bursting below like great sunflowers gone mad. And then as we started down again, still held in the lights, I remembered that the dog still had one of those cookies and a whole basket of incendiaries in his belly, and the light still held it. And I was very frightened.
And that does it for the Takeout today. For Major Garrett, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns. The Daily Report is coming up next.